Hi there. I'm Alex Hillman. I'm the co-founder of Indy Hall, which is a co-working space in Philadelphia. We've been around since 2006 and been pretty active in sharing the things that we've learned along the way. One of the interesting things about the growth of co-working as an industry is that you hear a lot about measurements of success in terms of the amount of members that co-working spaces have, how their communities are growing and things like that. But measuring success in a new industry like co-working is really challenging. You end up with a lot of, a lot of bold statements and things that aren't necessarily backed up with data. We have sort of large-scale industry trends, things like there's more independents and more freelancers and more entrepreneurs. But my problem with all of that information is that it's always been it came from the outside. It came from people other than the freelancers themselves, other than the independents themselves, other than the people who actually work in co-working spaces. So we decided to set out for a variety of reasons, some for our own co-working space, but some more for in general knowledge, to learn what it is about a co-working space like Indy Hall that our members perceive about it being successful, both in terms of what makes the co-working space successful, but also what makes the member successful, what makes them feel like their membership is valuable. So we did a little bit of research earlier this year and spent some time calling through that, and I'm excited to be able to share that with you, whether you are a member of Indy Hall, in which case, hey, thanks for sharing this information with us, someone who's interested in Indy Hall, or someone who's interested in co-working or community building in general. We're going to cover a good amount of ground in this presentation, which hopefully won't take all that much time, but is going to give you some insight into what members of a successful co-working space are thinking about and feeling and saying that make that space and that community that much more successful. So today's presentation is really about sort of trying to figure out how to quantify some of these fuzzy metrics around things like community and show you what they really mean in terms of value. So start out with a little bit of background for those of you who are less familiar with Indy Hall. We have been around since 2006. We were started in Philadelphia originally as really a community of people. There was no space to be spoken of, and it was really started with a personal need of my own, and that was that I was lonely. I was a freelancer working from home and trying to grow and find, really, before I even grew, I was trying to find the community here in Philadelphia that made sense to me, the people who are interested in building things on the internet, building cool things on the internet, advancing their craft and things like that. And through that process, discovered co-working and ended up launching Indy Hall, which is one of the earliest co-working efforts in the US. One of the things that I think sets us apart is we're not just a workspace. We're a very purposeful community. Our sort of stated purpose from the beginning, well, there's a bunch of components to it, but one of the most succinct ways to say it is that we aim to make Philadelphia we aim to make Philadelphia a better place to make a living doing what you love. But you can read a more extended version of what that means and how we actually do it on our website, indyhall.org/purpose. We do have over 200 active members. Now, that's not just people that sit on the sidelines and pay a monthly membership. One of the things that I think we pride ourselves in is how active, how engaged our community members are, and you're going to see more of that in this presentation. And the workspace component, which you can see here in the photograph, is currently about 8,500 square feet of community workspace, over 2 floors in Old City, Philadelphia. And we'll come back to a little bit more about how the members describe that space as well. So again, before we jump into those metrics that we were talking about, we'll talk real quickly about the business side, our approach to co-working. And one of the things that we like to share is the fact that our community is not just based on people that are here at Indy Hall every day. We have a spectrum of membership that's based on being here anywhere from full-time, or being here, having your own permanent desk, being here 3 days a week, being here 6 days a month, being here once, twice, maybe 3 times a month, or some case even less. You'll notice that 55, almost 56% of our membership, over half of our membership, is our basic member. And the really interesting thing about that is a lot of those basic members never use the workspace at all. They are members of Indy Hall to be a part of a community, to tap into knowledge and exchange, to have a pulse of what's going on in Philadelphia. And I think that's really a testament to the value, but we're going to get into that a little bit more. The other interesting thing is if you stack the breakdown of our membership headcount against where revenue comes from, you'll see that without the basic membership and the six-pack membership, six-pack is effectively a basic membership with 6 days instead of 1 included, we would be leaving over a quarter of our monthly revenue on the table. And that's monthly recurring revenue. We do earn revenue through other sources as well. This revenue is simply taking a snapshot at the monthly recurring revenue. Now, if you take a look at the way the membership breaks down, you might notice some interesting things. A couple of the trends that you might hear about in the news is how co-working is really, for this young up and coming, this millennial generation, all the young startups, all the young guys that are filling up these co-working spaces, I wanted to show these numbers to show not that we're doing a particularly great job. There's always room for improvement, but I wanted to show that these trends aren't necessarily true. One of the things that I think is really interesting is that our 55 and plus membership is about equal to those who are under age 24. But also interesting is that the 35 to 55 age range of our membership is almost identical if you combine them to our 25 to 34 age range of the membership. So yes, the millennials are here, but we're not the only ones, which I think is pretty fascinating. The other thing I wanted to sort of point out gender and the fact that we're coming up on a third of our membership being women. This is still a sort of dude-heavy space. I think we're still fighting against a lot of trends that sort of fall over from the technology industry, which is also a very dude-heavy space. The reason that I bring up the gender issue, however, is not because we said one day we need to have more women at Indy Hall. We make a conscious effort to say we need more of everybody at Indy Hall, and diversity is a much broader topic than that. And so we have to take a look at, well, it's not what do women want out of Indy Hall and how do we change to be more attractive to women. It's how do we be more attractive to a broader spectrum of people that happens to include women. And I'm very, very happy with the growth of female membership at Indy Hall over the last several years. One thing that we don't really have the data in this graph to back up, but I can say so far anecdotally, is that while you can come into Indy Hall on a given day and it might look like there's way less women, I would say that our full-time, if you were to segment this, our full-time membership is mostly men. We have a smaller than 1/3 of our full-time membership is women. However, if you were to look at our online discussion groups and our events and other things that we organize, and you look at the activity and the leadership and the participation, we have a lot more leadership and participation coming from the women, probably something that's more to the tune of an even 50-50 split between men and women. So just because our total population is only a third, which I still think is a significant growth from where we've been in the past, that's not the only way to look at gender, by population. We look at activity and engagement as well. We see some very interesting things in there. Moving forward as well into that discussion around diversity, people say, well, who works at Indy Hall? What kind of things do they do? And my usual response is, well, we've got this sort of typical design, development, web folks, because they've been mobile for a while. And so something like co-working, I think, speaks to them very naturally, very natively. And you can see this graph, or rather this image, which shows weighted by how often it was mentioned in our research. We still have that density of development and web and design, but if you look a little bit closer, you'll see there's sort of a constellation of a very interesting other that includes writing and journalism, usability, communications, art direction, photography, music publishing, online retail, fine art, assistant professor, so on and so forth. And I think we're dealing with a couple of things. One is the fact that more and more people are able to work from anywhere, and the longer they work from anywhere, then they realize that the virtues of working alone don't necessarily pair up with the virtues of being able to choose where you work, and they need a better place to work by choice, but have it not be alone. That's why we're seeing more people from other industries show up at a co-working space. The other thing is really comes down to how we communicate ourselves and how we interact with other communities sort of outside of our own. And we've definitely put some hard work into looking into what are the overlapping communities that our existing members are already a part of, and how do we reach the other people like them that don't necessarily think of themselves as a developer, as a techie, and say, well, do you work from home? If the answer is yes, I say, do you like working from home? And the answer is usually somewhere in the I do, but ... to no, I don't, and here's why. And that's an opportunity to learn from all these other types of people, all these other industries, and what kind of similarities we see in the pain that they have, which really boils down to the same pain that the techies have always had, which is this element of loneliness. So I'm excited to be able to show this chart again in 6 months and have the size of development and web and design shrink perhaps a bit, as well as the number of things showing up in the constellation around them grow significantly. One of the other things that I like to point out is a quote from one of our members who says that Indy Hall has people with a breadth of experiences and from all walks of life. Here you get people, and not just what they're doing now and today. You get people and their histories. And Bull has been a member since 2009, so he's seen this over and over and over. And the beautiful thing about the way we've sort of worked at the social interactions at Indy Hall is that people meet not just on based on topics of what they're interested in doing today, but in ways that help them understand and explore the things that they're interested in outside of work and the things that they've maybe done in the past. And those connections and those relationships that come out of them end up being much, much deeper. And the ways that people can help each other end up being much more interesting and much richer and complex and ultimately more valuable. So the next bit of information that we gathered from our members was how they self-describe their employment style. And what I think is interesting about this graph, when you give people sort of an open text box to describe how they work, one of the things that you'll notice here is that there's not a whole lot of mention of things like startup. We have people who refer to themselves as self-employed, people who work remotely for another company, and that's the dominant portion of our membership. And you start to ask yourself, what's the difference between self-employed and contractor, consultant, freelancer, which is not quite as large as self-employed, but still a pretty significant number. And the answer is we're not really sure yet, and this really comes down to how people identify themselves. But we do know that the majority of our membership doesn't work for companies at Indy Hall. In fact, less than 15% of them do. These are people who, once again, they were isolated. They work alone. Whether they work for themselves, they work for another person, whether they identify as self-employed, perhaps running a solo person company, or if they're a contractor or a freelancer where they do work for other companies. One of the things that I find really kind of fun is when you speak to a lot of people about why they join a co-working space, you start to notice some patterns. And we've noticed really two very distinct common stories that we hear from people about what life was like right before they joined Indy Hall. The first one is the one you see here, which is I joined Indy Hall because it got difficult editing books at home with two cats climbing all over my computer in my lap, like they are right now. So we have a lot of people who, prior to joining a co-working space, their primary source of companionship and often conversation at home is their pets, which I'm sure the pets love and appreciate, but isn't always the best for productivity or inspiration and collaboration. And we find a lot of people who realize that they need to get in touch with human beings again in order to really sort of spark that creativity and that motivation again. And the other is the folks who have families, whether that's parents who have kids at home that they're trying to take care of, or maybe the kids want attention while the parents are trying to get work done, or oftentimes even just a couple where they're driving each other crazy because they both work from home, and a little bit of space and separation is necessary in order to regain not just productivity but also maybe maintain their quality of life and relationship at home. So So with those two stories in mind, we want to dig a little bit deeper into seeing, well, what kinds of things are drawing people to co-working space like Indy Hall. So that one related to the cats, the isolation, is one of the most common ones. We hear things like working out in my apartment was becoming maddening. I didn't want to be isolated in my house all day while I was working. So even having people use the word isolation and lonely is probably one of the most common patterns in people describing why finding Indy Hall was sort of like finding an oasis in the middle of the desert. The other side of it, though, is sometimes people don't want to co-work every day. They like variety, they like change, they like change of scenery. And there's a trend that was reported at one of the co-working conferences a year or two ago that there's an increasing number of people that actually end up working from more than one co-working space. We haven't seen a whole lot of that here at Indy Hall, but we do have people saying that they like having a place to actually physically go to work. And the fact that they're super productive when they're changing their scenery. It helps them find focus. And oftentimes being around people who are both different and similar helps them bring focus, but also that variety helps them learn and see things from new perspective. So the fact that people get to choose to see something a little bit different than they're used to is bringing our members quite a great deal of value. And when we sort of start plotting out all of the reasons that members join Indy Hall, and we sort of look at the top 10, at the top we've got these concepts of community and the people, which are a bit vague at this stage of the game, and we'll dig a little bit deeper into them. But right beyond that, you do have isolation, which I think speaks to the core pain that co-working ultimately solves. So there's a lot of talk about collaboration, a lot of talk about business exchange, but I think isolation is the number one pain that people have that causes them to seek out a co-working space. Beyond that, people tend to like our location. We are in a convenient location. People mention things like our access to public transit, easy to bike to, we have bike parking, things like that. And right beyond that is vibe, which is another topic that we'll dive into a little bit more in just a bit, but sort of the energy that they get from coming to Indy Hall, and sort of a mix of aesthetic as well as what they sort of take from the experience. The fact that they're comfortable, the fact that they were looking for inspiration, they're looking to become productive, they're looking to build relationships, and they're looking to learn, sort of round out the top 10 reasons that members choose to join Indy Hall. But what's really interesting is when you take a look at the next set of questions where we try to figure out what reasons people choose to stay a member of Indy Hall. So people show up for one reason, but that's not necessarily the reason they stay. Now at the top of our list, once again, we have community and people. These are important, but they're also not very descriptive. So we need to go a little bit deeper into them, which again, we'll do in just a moment. But what leaps to the top beyond that, replacing isolation, is motivation. People reporting that they come to Indy Hall and it's motivation that they maybe haven't had in a while. We think about that person who was driving 45 minutes, but in spite of the extra commute, it ended up being a super productive day. People stay because our members are friendly, and that's something that we really pride ourselves in. When people walk in and they sit by themselves because no one introduces themselves, people can sit. If the thing that they're trying to join, or the thing trying to escape in joining, is isolation, if they're met with anything other than friendliness, they're not really going to be met with a solution to their problem. Beyond that friendliness, people are finding inspiration, which I believe comes from the next topic in a lot of cases, which is the diversity, what people are seeing, what people are experiencing, being different from what they're used to. We are also known for our art and for our events. The art, I think, contributes to that vibe as well as that aesthetic. And the events, which we're going to talk a whole lot about in just a minute, is something that people come to appreciate, even if they didn't come to Indy Hall because of the events initially. I find it really interesting that location ends up being pushed towards near the bottom when it was so close to the top, and the reasons people join, the reasons people stay, location ends up being a much lower consideration, which maybe means that you have to try harder to get people in if your location is not as ideal, but you can look at all of these other things besides location that people tend to value that helps you retain them as members. And finally, learning, which kind of surprised me that it would be at the bottom of this list, although I think that the people describe learning in lots of different ways, and I think that learning is maybe not being described as learning, but it's also showing up in the descriptions of things like diversity and inspiration and motivation, as well as even people in community. So I think learning maybe weaves its way through a number of the other reasons that people choose to stay at Indy Hall. Along that vein, it's really great to hear the ways people describe the level of inspiration. Indy Hall is a hotbed of amazing people. It's all about being around smart people doing good work. Indy Hall being a glimpse into a different world, and the fact that it's loaded with potential. And the people are not just inspired by what they can potentially get from Indy Hall, but also what they can give to Indy Hall, what they can contribute to become sort of a part of the sum that ultimately adds it up to something greater than the individual components. Beyond that, we also see a really interesting pattern in the fact that people tend to form relationships with other Indy Hall members long before they join. So by the time they become members, it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel very transactional. It doesn't feel like they're coming in to rent a desk. They're becoming a part of a community that ultimately they're already a part of. They're already getting value from. They're already feeling the value from the relationships that they formed with multiple points of contact within the Indy Hall community. And then once they sort of officially join, they can sort of immerse themselves in even more, and in many cases accelerate the growth of those number of friendships and relationships, which is a pretty neat effect to see in action. We also notice that a lot of people do come specifically for the place. They're coming from a place because it's away from their kids and they're trying to be more productive, or they've heard that it's cool and they needed a place to work and it was affordable, or good network connection. But the reason that they stayed was for something other than the place. I stayed for the community. I realized it was much more than just a desk to rent. And I think that speaks volumes, that even though people aren't necessarily coming in looking for community, that sort of once they see it, that they realize the value of it, and that becomes the reason that they stay. So in some cases, that means that we might want to surface the community a bit earlier. And in other cases, there are people who aren't necessarily looking for community. They are looking specifically for a desk. And we don't want to downplay that too much, because those are people who wouldn't necessarily be out there looking for a community, but they're happy to find it once they discover that it's sort of a part of the workspace that they've chosen to become a part of. Beyond those reasons that I mentioned before that people chose to stay, these are sort of another word cloud of supporting reasons that people appreciate Indy Hall and appreciate and value their membership. The top of the list, things like helpfulness, sincerity, supportiveness, openness, flexibility, and the family-like nature of our community. But again, that constellation of other supporting elements like activities and evolution, the sense of belonging and usefulness, leadership, location, the neighborhood, getting work, the fact that there's trust, and all these other things that I think people come to discover on their own, and everybody sort of finds their own value in the experience that the co-working space is able to support and provide. And while there's diversity in that, there's also these very interesting patterns, and I think this does a good job of showing what some of those are. So we asked members, how happy are you with your membership, and how would you rate the value of your membership? Noticed a couple of very interesting things. When we asked people how happy they were, we asked them on a scale of very satisfied, somewhat satisfied, and not satisfied at all. Thankfully, no one was not satisfied, but 20% of the people said that they were only somewhat satisfied. So well, what's that about? And we'll come back to that in just a second. If you look at how would you rate the value of your membership, we'll notice that over 2/3 of our membership say that they're getting more value than the cost, which I think is a good thing. People should be getting more. We should be able to over deliver value. And another solid 30% saying that the value matches the cost. And that little 3.5% that says there's not enough value actually reached out individually and explained why they gave that. They were giving an honest answer, but they were saying that these are people who pay for their membership even though they're not capable of using it because they have a job that takes up more of their time and they're not able to be as involved as they want to be. But they see Indy Hall as a good thing for the overall ecosystem that otherwise supports them, and they see more of Indy Hall in their future. So these are people who are saying, I'm not getting the value out of the cost. Sorry, I'm not getting value to match the cost that I'm paying now, but I do see a potential for it in the future, which I think is wonderful that those people were able to say that out loud to me. The other interesting thing is that in spite of the fact that 20% of people were only somewhat satisfied, 100% of people who responded, who we spoke to, said that they would absolutely recommend Indy Hall to a friend. So if we dig back into those stats of the somewhat happy versus very happy, the people who were somewhat happy, we broke them into two categories with a little bit of cross-analysis of our data, and realized that 90% of the people who said they are somewhat happy with their membership report making only a few friends, and the remaining 10% of those who say that they're somewhat happy report making no friends. And I think this is fascinating, and it shows us an opportunity to improve both member onboarding, the kinds of activities that we do, and figure out why people aren't making friends, because this understanding, this realization backs up something that we've been saying all along, but now we have data to support it, and the fact that relationships matter the most in a co-working space. People get more value when they have more relationships, when they have more friendships, I'm really excited to finally not just be saying that, but have data straight from our members to support that. So moving forward, we asked our members, what is one goal that you would like to achieve as an Indy Hall member? And far and above, the most common response is that people want to be a more active part of the community. And for some people, that means they want to help organize events. That means that they want to come to more events. It means they want to come work at Indy Hall more. It means they simply want to engage. And oftentimes, the reasons are as simple as they don't have enough time. But sometimes we've noticed that people want to be a more active part of the community, but they simply don't know how. And so one of the things that we're going to be working on is looking for more sort of on-ramps to help people figure out their way of being a more active part of the community. So we're going to be digging deeper into the people who respond and say, I want to be a more active part of the community, and find out, well, what does that actually mean? Although we do have some clues right below that, and the fact that people are looking to meet more people. In spite of the fact that we've done lots to sort of accelerate serendipity and make it easy for people to meet each other, people still want to meet more people. And so we're looking at ways to help facilitate that more and help accelerate that, depending on how, no matter where people are coming from, no matter how often people are even in the physical workspace, which is, I think, a big challenge for co-working spaces, is that people who are not here every day don't get to meet all of the people who are not here every day. The fact that people want to help others succeed showed up as a very common pattern. People are finding their own success, and they want to pay that forward. I think that's an incredible thing that people set as a personal goal. And related to that, people want to work with other members. People want to sort of match their skills up with the complementary skills of another member and do more than they could do on their own, which is ultimately the reason that I started Indy Hall for myself in the first place. And then also in that list is the fact that there's a growing number of members of Indy Hall who want to quit their jobs, and they see Indy Hall as sort of light at the end of the tunnel and say, I'm going to figure out a way out, and being at Indy Hall even a little bit is helping me figure that path out. And along the way, they want to quit, they want to start a company, they want to start freelancing, and they want to start working at Indy Hall. The rest of the reasons sort of start stacking up things like, I want to grow my business, I want to help grow the community, increasing productivity and skills, start matching up with the graph of the reasons that people join and stay. We do have a bunch of people who want to start their first business. They want to start freelancing. They want to learn from others. And because we do happen to have this really diverse creative scene, a creative community at Indy Hall, there's people who really want to see Indy Hall be a bigger part of the art scene in Philadelphia. So really interesting to see the goals, and I'm excited to see these not just be fulfilled, but to see this graph shift over time as more and more people are fulfilling these goals. So people want community. People want to be a part of the community. People want to be active in the community. People want to contribute to the community. And so, where can I find the community in the first place? So we start with events, community events in particular. Now these aren't limited to events that are held at Indy Hall or even organized by Indy Hall. These can be the things, the social events, the workshops, the classes, show and tell, night owls, and any number of other things that we'll show in just a second. but the fact that members are most often attending either weekly or monthly. And one of the things that I think is really interesting about this graph is the number of people who attend on a monthly basis. Now, monthly being larger than weekly is not inherently a bad thing, and it also doesn't say that we should undo the weekly events, because the fact of the matter is inside of the people who attend events on a monthly basis are people who attend events that happen every week only once a month, if you see what I'm saying. So, for instance, Night Owls being an every week event, there are some people who only come to Night Owls once a month. And if Night Owls wasn't every week, those people might only come to Indy Hall once a quarter. And so by having weekly events, our monthly attendance, our monthly activity, event activity goes up, and I believe quarterly goes down. If we were to remove weekly from the equation, we would see attendance on a quarterly basis increase and monthly decrease, simply because the number of opportunities to show up once a month to an event that interests you or that you care about, and to see people that you like and you know you're going to look forward to seeing, is more available with events that happen every week. And we asked people, what are your favorite Indy Hall events and activities? And we got a mix of things, Night Owls being at the top of the list, which is our every Wednesday night late night working session, which is a little more social. B-Team is a group of people that go to the comic book store every Wednesday to get new comic book editions. We have parties and celebrations every couple of months. Happy hours, we have yoga, show and tell, our art and music shows, poker night, dinner club, even making coffee and our blood drive show up as people's favorite activities. This isn't just a list that we came up with. These are the things that people said, these are my favorite activities. And the coolest thing about this list in my mind is the fact that everything on this list, with the exception of actually our town hall, is organized and led by our community members. This is not programming that Indy Hall came up with as sort of, we're going to do Night Owls, or we're going to do show and tell. There were things the community members said, I want to do this, I want to lead this, and we made our role to help them make it happen. And so this list continues to grow, and I think that these things are the people's favorites because they are ultimately run by them. They are organized by them, and so they know what value they're going to get out of them, instead of them just being recruitment events that we would come up with on our own. Now, community isn't just found at events. We have a lot of members who, like I said, never or very, very rarely work at the co-working space. And we also have a lot of members who never or very, very rarely attend events. We have an online community, we have a discussion list, and we asked people, how do you interact with our discussion list? We got some interesting results. We broke it down by the number of people who start new discussions and threads. You can see that not everybody, in fact, almost as many people never start new discussions as do. Not inherently a bad thing, because a lot more people reply and post and comments. But even more interesting is the fact that almost everybody at least reads the email notifications of the discussions, even if they're not actively engaging. We have a lot of lurkers. From the looks of it, the better part of 15-20% of the people who never reply or post or start new discussions are at least reading the email notifications. So don't forget that just because you've got a physical place and just because you have events doesn't mean you can't be engaging your community in non-physical space as well. And one of the beautiful things about that is that the community itself isn't limited by the size of the space or by the size of all our walls. And that's how we've been able to grow as large as we have, and always have the opportunity, as well as the capital, to grow should we need to grow the physical space, when we need to grow the physical space, with our own resources. So for the next section, we asked our members, how often have you hired or contracted other Indy Hall members for business-related projects? And considering that within co-working, there's a lot of talk about collaboration and professional collaboration, we were surprised to see that over half of our members have never hired or contracted another Indy Hall member, or been hired or contracted by another Indy Hall member. Meanwhile, the remaining people who have, a good chunk of them have, once they've done it more than once. So we wanted to look a little bit closer at this. And we noticed a pattern in the fact that we asked people whether or not they've made friendships, personal friendships, not just professional friendships, but personal friendships at Indy Hall. And we noticed that over half of people said at least a few, and close to 40% said many. So we have a lot of people at Indy Hall who have built personal friendships. and a very small number of people that responded and said, I haven't made any friends since I've been a member here. We don't know yet, and we have the data, we just haven't necessarily dug through it yet to determine, are they people who are brand new? Are they people who are having trouble finding friends? And we're going to be able to dig into that a little bit further as we continue to analyze our research. But we noticed something interesting when we cross-referenced these two pieces of information, how many people are hiring each other versus how many people are forming relationships. When we look at who is responding which way to these questions, we noticed that 44% of the members who shared work at least once reported starting at least a few friendships. We noticed that 56% of members who shared work at least once reported starting many friendships. Of the remaining people, 100% of the people who said that they've never worked together say that they've also started no friendships. They've built no relationships. And once again, this goes back to support our thesis that relationships really matter the most. And in this case, relationships that can actually lead to, and do lead to, the business exchange that people often come to co-working spaces looking for. And so this backs up our philosophy when we have new members coming to Indy Hall. Often they'll ask a question like, well, I'm looking to hire a designer, or I'm looking for a co-founder. And we say, people who come to Indy Hall looking for those things tend to be disappointed. But people who come to Indy Hall looking to make friends and to build relationships and to share ideas invariably find the work exchange, the business exchange that they came here looking for. So relationships first, transactions second. Really at the core of the philosophy of Indy Hall, and we see it playing out in the numbers, in the self-reported numbers from our members, and that's really exciting. So a little bit more about how people from Indy Hall describe Indy Hall, the place itself. They say it's a place where people choose to be together for work. It's a clubhouse where amazing people get amazing things done. It's easy to get inspired by the physical space and feed on the energy in the room. This is a place where people are happy to be at work. It's the best working environment you could ever imagine. And the best way to understand it is to visit it. It has to be experienced. Now, these weren't just like top of the list selections. These were just representative of patterns that we noticed in the ways people described the place. So people were saying these same kinds of things in not quite the identical words, so we didn't want to repeat them. But this is not just the top of the list. This is what the vast majority of our responses of how people describe the physical space of Indy Hall, the place, the vibe that I was talking about before. This is how our members describe it. They also say that Indy Hall brings them balance and it broadens their horizons. And I love this comment that someone said, it's bringing me closer to people, which is especially good for me because I'm very introverted. A lot of times people think of Indy Hall or co-working spaces in general because they're so designed for socialization that if you're an introvert or you're not into socializing with people, that you don't belong. And one of the beautiful things about Indy Hall is it's a place where you can feel safe being yourself. And the members who come in simply to be themselves, whether that's the gregarious, outgoing person or the introverted, shy person, still can find their place here. They can make friends. They can build those relationships without the pressure and speed that's necessary in many networking environments, because it allows for that slow growth. And I think that makes a place like Indy Hall a great place for introverts who, just because they're introverted doesn't mean they don't want to be around other people. And let's not forget that this is about work. And so we asked Indy Hall members, how does your membership in Indy Hall improve your work? And we're looking sort of for their perspective on why the value of a membership makes sense for them, for their business. And so we hear things like this. We hear, it's helped me find work, do work, and find others to join my work. I've had several opportunities for work. I love this one. It changed I need to work into I want to go to work. We've got that motivation component showing up again. The fact that I can get in the zone to bang out a task or a project. And it's a great alternative to going to my office, which adds stress and interruptions, versus the other side, which is working from home, which is not great for productivity, sort of the best of both worlds. We also hear that Indy Hall's been been influential in people's individual growth. Their skills have improved. Their professional advice from other experienced members has given them an edge. People that are independent, people that are freelancers, or even people that are remote workers sometimes struggle to feel like they're part of a bigger team. And even if you're not actively collaborating with other members of Indy Hall, the experience helps you feel like you're a part of a bigger team because you're working towards something together, bigger than just the work that you're doing every day. When people are struggling, how effective the support from empathetic peers who have been there, who understand, is huge. And of course, there's that focus. Instead of 2-year-old wanting more from daddy, and I can't help but feel a little bit bad for the 2-year-old that wants more than daddy, but I'm sure daddy is able to give them just as much focused time at home after work when he's been able to put in a more focused day of work at Indy Hall. Some other really interesting things that we heard from members was that it's like a superhero team. We all have our own titles and adventures, but we work together in the pursuit of common good. The people are friendly and creative. They're skilled from various disciplines, but they're super nice. The friendliness and the wonderful creative people. Again, people describing the other members as how often do you describe your coworkers as people that you really look forward to seeing, spending time with, and that friendliness, I think, is a big part of it. When people talk about the events and activities, they still stress the people of Indy Hall more than anything. And I think it's really fascinating for those people that are aspirational, that are maybe the first-time freelancer or a new freelancer, or they're trying to advance their freelancing skill. The fact they're seeing other people succeed is helping them take their work more seriously and exposing them to other talented workers, other independent workers, and showing them what's possible and what they can be doing to be better at their craft. Other things, the fact that it's a community of people who are passionate about Philadelphia, what they're doing, and about trying new things. It's real people who are better than talking to inanimate objects, plants, and pets, like we talked about earlier. The fact that Indy Hall is a reason I have many friends in Philadelphia. A lot of times we have people that join Indy Hall when they're first moving to Philadelphia, and it becomes part of their core network of friends. And it's not just people for them to work with. These are people that they go for beers with after work, or they go to concerts after work, or their kids hang out, or their spouses hang out. We're not just coworkers. We are friends, and that's pretty special. People with the goal of getting work done and building relationships. It's really at the heart of it. We're here to get things done and not forget that we're here to get to know each other at the same time. Intelligent, determined people. How could you not be motivated when you're around smart, motivated people and they're sharing that with you? And that really is what brings me to the core point of why Indy Hall exists and why people join Indy Hall, is because if you just optimize for money, you're going to find yourself losing out on happiness. And if you just optimize for happiness, you might find yourself not quite as prosperous as you hoped or would like to be. And the point of Indy Hall is to sort of help you optimize right in the middle, where you can be successful, where you can grow your business, where you can be generating as much or more money than you thought you could because you're being more productive. You're learning new ways of working. You're learning how to advance your skills. You're being inspired by other people. You're billing more hours. At the same time, you're not hustling yourself into the ground. You're not giving up your happiness. You're not giving up your quality of life. You're not working 80 hours a week. You're creating some separation between work time and home time and family time and social time and friend time. And so it's this line down the middle where we've optimized for prosperity and happiness. That's the point of Indy Hall. And that's the point of being a member of Indy Hall. And so with that, thank you. Can't thank our members enough for the time that they took in filling out our surveys and answering questions and giving us this information and really sharing their perspective. Their perspective is helping us make Indy Hall better for them, and it's going to help us help them make Indy Hall better for them as well. And we're even more excited that we're going to be able to share this information beyond Indy Hall, hopefully to help people who aren't working at Indy Hall and they're working at other co-working spaces to make the experience even better for themselves, for their members, and so on and so forth. So if you're interested in joining Indy Hall, you can check out indyhall.org for all the information about what we're about, what our membership looks like, and how to become a part of Indy Hall. And if you aren't in Philadelphia and Indy Hall's maybe not right for you, but you're really, really interested in how we've accomplished all of these things, we're thrilled to be helping other communities and co-working spaces around the world by teaching the lessons that we've learned, the actionable stuff, and really sort of change the mindsets of people who are maybe stuck in stuck in a mode where they're having a hard time getting members, they're having a hard time getting their members engaged. So we're teaching workshops around the world, and you can find out more about that at workshop.indyhall.org, where this presentation lives. Thanks for your time, and I look forward to speaking with you soon.